All right. Uh, yes. Hi. I've introduced myself like 3 times, but again, I'm Evan, senior. Been in this group 4 years, and I'm currently president. And today, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our theme and about kind of what JN is. So, a big point of our concert is to, yeah, again, as Megan was saying, spread the truth and joy of the gospel through music. And one of the points of having this message is to really get people, especially non-Christians, to think about Christianity. So with that in mind, there are two kind of main questions that I hope to center this message, which is more just like a rambling on. And it's, what does it mean for God to save us? And why do we need to be saved? So keep those two questions in mind as I kind of go through a short dialogue about Lifeline. So as I was reflecting on Lifeline, so first, why we chose Lifeline. If you have been listening to our songs, Reason is about how God's love is the reason we keep on believing. And Take It One Day at a Time is about how when we go through hard times in our lives, we can have faith in God in order to keep moving forward. So in these senses, our lifeline is our faith in God. And one thing that I was reflecting on when thinking about Lifeline is that a lifeline that's just thrown at you. So like suppose you're like sinking in the middle of the ocean and then like the waves are like really hard and somebody just throws a rope at you. Like if they don't pull you, if it's just like a rope, like you can't do anything, right? It's like pretty much useless. So it doesn't matter if somebody just like throws you something, like somebody has to be pulling you. And to me, how I've been thinking about this is, to me, God is the person, or I guess not person, but the entity that is able to pull me through these troubled waters. He's a person that is strong enough and stable enough and steady enough and faithful enough to continue to pull me, even if I resist against him, even if I resist and like swim the other way or stop trying. And yeah, so this is why I think it's important for us. Nice. This is why it's for me important to have faith in God, because having faith in other things, other people, like other things that we have faith in, like our own efforts, they can't pull us. Eventually they'll always fail. And to me, that is why we have to trust in God. So now to talk about the first question, what does it mean for God to save us? I wanted to first talk about my father. So during this pandemic, my dad actually got sick. He got a form of leukemia that I cannot say because I'm bad at English. It is chronic myelomonocytic leukemia, and he was hospitalized in October 2020. And it was really frustrating for my dad. Actually, like many of you in this room, my dad was like he's from China. Like he grew up in China. He grew up as like actually in the farmland. He kind of grew up as a peasant, and he had to work really hard to come to America, right? Like he grinded school harder than anybody I've seen here, which is really saying something. And like made his way like through the tops of the University of China. He got accepted to PhD school here. And even when my parents came here, they had to struggle. They had to struggle off $300 a month for years just to make a living, just to get through. And to my dad, he's always been a person that was he had a lot of faith in himself. He knew that his efforts could get him really far, and his efforts had gotten him very far in his life. So this sickness was incredibly painful for him. Not just because, okay, well, first of all, it was painful because, like, obviously physically very painful. Like, he had to stay in a hospital bed, constantly get injections. He was very dissatisfied with how the doctors were treating him because this leukemia is actually very rare, and it's very not well studied about the best ways to treat it. So actually, a lot of the medicine was quite experimental, and there were definitely mishaps along the way. So he was suffering from the effects of the medicine. He was suffering from just having to lay there all the time. But most of all, he was suffering because he was powerless. He felt like he couldn't, like in his own efforts, he couldn't do anything about his situation. And so what does it mean for God to save my dad in this instance? Does it mean that God is able to just like heal him? Would that be like the be all end all? And it's a question that I reflected on a lot because actually he eventually passed away actually in September after a very long fight with the cancer. And in my head, I think about, did God really save him in that instance? Because sometimes in my own kind of worldly perspective, it's like, if God really loved him and really wanted to save him, he would have healed him. But then I kind of was reflecting more on the time that my dad spent in the hospital. In the beginning, as I was saying, he was in a very big emotional distress. He couldn't do anything for himself. He was in physical pain all the time. And, it was to the point where it was hard for him to, whenever my mom went to see him, he would be sad. He would just be angry. He would be dominated by his situation. Clearly, not blaming him. Obviously, anybody would. It's, yeah. But I think as the time went on, something actually very amazing happened. So at the very beginning, actually within 2 months in, 3 months in, he was already saying things like, just let me die. Because, in his very Asian point of view, it's very utilitarian, right? To him, another thing that I guess I kind of assumed everybody felt because I'm Asian is that I hate being burdens to others. And I'm sure people feel this way too. It's something that's ingrained in me that I all of a sudden say it because I forgot that it was something that had to be said. But yes, obviously to my dad, it was so hard for him too because he felt like he was being a burden. He felt like he was just laying in bed, couldn't do anything. And he hated burdening my mom and I and my sister with all this. And he said it would just be better for him to just leave. And just to, I guess he'd argue financially and all this. And over time, he actually became less and less angry about it. You see, my dad has always been Christian, but he knew about God, he believed in God, but for various reasons in his life, he never really accepted God. I think a lot of the reason was because he wanted to work for himself. He didn't want God to save him. He just wanted to save himself in a sense. And he was never able to let go of that. He was never able to let go of just relying on himself. But finally, at this point in his life, he had no choice because there was nothing he could do. He has nothing he could do. He couldn't rely on the doctors because he felt like they were screwing up. He couldn't rely on his family because what can we do to make him not sick? And at this point in his life, he finally had to really accept who God was. He really had to accept that he couldn't change the situation for himself. And when he did this, he suddenly became more at peace. He stopped being so angry whenever we went to see him. We were actually able to have great conversations with him and able to really have, he was really just grateful to see us and really just more joyful. And this really brings me to the point back of what does it mean for him to be saved? In this case, I think what it means for him to be saved is that he was no longer dominated by a situation. He was no longer dominated by the fact that he had to be in the hospital, that he had no control over his life, that he was completely powerless. He didn't let that affect him, if that makes sense. Obviously it affected him, but okay, maybe that doesn't make sense. But he was able to really let go of that. And with that came peace. With that came a way for him to be able to appreciate the things that were in his life, even in his horrid situation. So there's a verse in Philippians, very popular, right? That I should have memorized. It's basically, if you lay all your anxieties and supplications up to God through prayer, he will grant you a peace beyond understanding. And to me, what it means to be saved in this case isn't that you'll be saved physically. It doesn't mean that everything will be perfect in your life. But it does mean that you'll be able to have a peace beyond understanding because you know that God is working for you. And that was the peace that I saw in him before he passed away. Now to extend more on this, I'll talk a little bit about what I was going through during that exact same time frame. So for me, I was at home for the whole year and a half during COVID. Basically just separated from community, right? It was being separated from community was actually huge for me because that was something that was always super important to me. And although Joyful Noise still happened, it happened virtually, and a lot of people actually went in person because a lot of people were in Pittsburgh. So I was just on Zoom and everybody was chilling together, and I was like, nice. Yeah. And obviously, my dad going to the hospital meant that I had to take up a lot more responsibility at home in terms of making money, in terms of just making sure that like everything was like all right, and helping my mom a lot more with like like finances or like these types of things. And I think for me, uh, I guess the point of this, what I'm trying to say is through my own personal experience, I understand that not being dominated doesn't mean that it doesn't still affect you. So I don't want it to come across as if like, oh, because I have like faith in God, that I will just be at peace 100% of the time. Actually, even now, I'd hesitate to say that I've really fully processed everything that's happened in the last 2 years because this semester was way too busy because CMU. And I never really got the time to like think about what happened and like think about how I felt and think about these types of things. And they still affect me. Like I still sometimes feel myself getting like really angry for some reason or really sad for some reason. And I mean, who knows where that's coming from. And I think to me, I still feel as if I'm not dominated by it because it doesn't consume me. I feel like because of my faith through prayer, I'm able to have peace, let go of these situations from time to time, and really grow in other ways. I feel like, oh my gosh, everything's falling. Yeah, through this year, JN has been amazing, I think. I've been really grateful for everybody in this group. And honestly, like, for some reason, I just feel like the relationships I've been having with people have been, like, better. And just, like, I actually go to class now. Like, I don't know if that's happened to anybody. Like, I have, like, reverse senioritis. Like, I've been going to class, and there's this class that I hate, but I'm like, man, the professor's so nice. Like, I, like, don't know what's going on. It's, like, really weird. Like, literally since freshman year, I always skipped class. But now I'm like, man, I kind of want to go to lecture. I like reverse senioritis. And it's like, what I'm trying to say is like, I'm still able to grow. I'm still able to let go of all the things that have happened because God is faithful. Because when I pray to him and lay my anxieties onto him, he is faithful in granting me peace. And because of this, I'm able to continue to grow in the ways that he would desire me to. Now, I want to go on to the second question, which is, why do we need to be saved? And this is something that I've been wrestling a lot with about how to like talk about, because it's a very foreign concept if you're not Christian. Because I'm sure for a lot of you that actually maybe you feel like you're just doing fine. Because I know that there were even times like during this time where I felt like I'm just doing fine. Like, like I can handle everything. Like I feel like that I can do this, even though I know that's not true. And it's sometimes really hard to think about why we need to be saved. There's two main reasons. One is that if you believe in an omnipotent God, then any offense to him has severe consequence. If you do anything in offense to an all-powerful being, then the consequences should be all-powerful. And this is why, when people say the consequences of sin is death, that is why. So, in one sense, we need to be saved because we need to be saved from our sin, because if we're not, it leads to death. But I think another way that's easier for me to grasp about, and maybe easier to think about if you maybe don't believe in God, is to think about just the purpose. I think for me, that's what it really comes down to, especially as the child of Asian immigrants, right? I grinded through high school. I went to this 30%, 40% Asian high school. All my friends went to all the science camps, MOP, whatever, USICO, I don't know how many of these acronyms you guys know: JMO, USMO, LOL, League of Legends, TFT, TF2, I don't know. Yeah. And you work so hard. Actually, I've heard so many stories, of friends that are 2-3 years older than me, already going through existential crises because you work so hard, you get a job at Google, work for 3 hours a day, and I don't know what you do for the rest of your time, because it's just confusing, right? Why did I do all that just for this? And I think that it's really it comes back to the question of, what are you dominated by? What do you cling on to? Everybody has some reason to keep moving forward, right? You probably have a reason why you came to this school. I don't think that many people actually came here because it was oh, I love CMU, I want to learn all this stuff. That's definitely not what I see reflected in most of the students, right? Everybody has some ulterior goal. Think about that goal. Think about what you're clinging on to, and think about what that leads you to. And I think that if you do that, hopefully you could see that ultimately, if it's not something eternal, it's something that's ultimately not worth it. So yeah, I hope that after this time that we can have discussion. Like this concert is kind of scheduled, like structured in a way that hopefully it's like kind of an intimate setting, kind of a place where we can all kind of just talk. And I hope that during this time, you really just think about what does it mean for God to save us and why we need to be saved.